Hello, everyone. I'm Hyun Park from Amalgam Insights, and thank you so much for joining me in this presentation. So, I've been thinking a lot recently about the future of the data analyst, and this thought process was only accelerated when I was recently at Tableau conference earlier this year. Obviously, Tableau has been an influential vendor in defining the data analyst's role, and I think it was a bit of surprise when data analysts started saying that Tableau was expanding its platform both to include AI and to have more data elements and data capabilities associated with the platform in uh, pushing the maturity of its data support. So a bunch of things that were happening there made me think about how the data analyst role has matured over the 21st century, really throughout my employment career. As I started as a data analyst once upon a time, learning SQL, creating reports, and doing the basics to make data legible, barely legible from a managerial perspective. But I do really think that one of the biggest changes that has happened within the 21st century is that we have seen the data analyst become one of the unsung heroes of the 21st century. We now take it for granted that businesses talk about being data friendly or data driven, or executives talk about making data driven decisions or making analytic decisions or being an analytic business, all these buzzwords that show up all the time, right? We hear them all the time. And when you get down to it, frankly, there hasn't been that much that has changed from a data collection perspective throughout the 21st century. Sure, we collect a lot more unstructured data, but frankly, how much of that gets into analytics at this point? Eh, a lot of the stuff that still gets analyzed at this point is the structured data that we've been using the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years in enterprise apps, in structured data, in relational databases. And that analysis is done by the data analyst who has brought that data to life to the extent that everybody can now make these highfalutin claims. So congratulations to us for empowering everybody else to take credit for data. But I think we've done a really good job, all kidding aside, in making data a fundamental part of the business. So as we think about this evolution of the data analyst, the role has really changed. When I started working with data, it was the real challenge was simply creating the right tables, charts, reports, maybe graphs, maybe some simple visualizations. But it was hard to do anything fancy unless you had extremely high elite skills. And now it's not super hard to become a data steward or to improve your storytelling skills associated with the data, or to become a data designer where you are improving the visualization associated with the data and analytics, or to be a data contextualizer where you are figuring out how data and analytics fit into a role, a geography, a business unit, or some other category. You can also be a business case builder where you start working with the data to make the case for a business to do something better, to be a internal business consultant in many cases, or to be a data standard bearer where you are setting the standards for your company to use data and analytics more intelligently and avoid stupid pie charts that add up to 300%. So there's a lot of things that the data analyst can do at this point, right? And I was interested in looking at how data analysts were perceived at a high level. So I compared the data analyst in Google Trends to two of the biggest trendy keywords that have shown up over the 21st century: big data and artificial intelligence. And I started in 2010, 15 years ago. So 15 years ago, you can see that data analyst and big data as phrases were about neck and neck, actually, with the AI term being slightly more popular, but nowhere near where it is today, obviously. And then that's where things were for a couple of years. And then here around 2012 or so, we start seeing that the big data topic takes off, obviously, with Hadoop coming into place and the idea that we can get some value out of all of this data exhaust that we've been creating for many years. So that big data topic absolutely took off for a bunch of years, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. Big data is still the top trend. But if you look sneakily enough, that data analyst terms got slowly more popular throughout the years as the idea of the data analyst organically grew and more people became actual data analysts. And that growth has became very consistent. And then a funny thing started happening that as big data started becoming more and more common, the interest in big data started declining a little bit. And if we start looking at 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020 or so, we actually see that the big data analyst term meets up with big data and meets up with AI. So for one shining moment there, the data analyst term was just as popular as the biggest buzzwords of tech. Of course, after that, we started seeing the the AI term take off when GPT started becoming extremely popular. But even after that GPT moment, look at where the data analyst line has been the past couple of years. A little zigzaggy, but I would say overall, it has stayed pretty consistent and at an all-time high. Businesses still say that the data analyst is extremely important from a search perspective, from a basic term perspective, and it's holding its own against AI, which is almost unbelievable when you think about it. When you think about all the hype associated with AI, our humble data analyst keyword is still a majorly important Google trend at the end of the day. So kudos to us for beating out big data in the long term. Wow. So, but at the same time, the perception of the data analyst is increasingly bifurcated. There are these commodity tasks around data validation and cleansing, data models and structure, report and dashboard building, training and support, things that are seen as important, definitely table stakes, but not necessarily the tasks that are going to get you executive attention or get you that raise or get you that promotion in and of themselves. It's often going to take some sort of value added activity around defining the analytic drivers behind some sort of business outcome, being a better analytic storyteller, being a better business consultant, or creating agents, apps, and other long-term data and analytic assets that are going to get you to that next level or to get you to be a higher grade individual contributor at the end of the day. So that data analyst role, we are definitely seeing a change. We were already seeing that change happen prior to AI, but the era of AI, the last couple of years, is definitely shifting expectations of what the data analyst should and shouldn't be doing, right? We are seeing all of these executives starting to come out to say, Mark Cuban, companies can either be great at AI or risk being put out of business. The robots are coming for your job. AI is replacing human tasks faster than you think. Bill Gates is saying that doctors and teachers are going to be replaced within the next 10 years. And Mark Zuckerberg, saying AI will replace mid-level engineers soon. Wow. Sounds like AI is about to take over everything. And they're not just coming for our jobs, they're coming for our hobbies. Here's a robot completing a half marathon in Beijing. And if they can come after our half marathons and create and do this art and create music while we're cleaning up the data, something seems wrong with this picture, right? I was promised flying cars and transporters and going to the moon, not doing a lot of work to clean things up so that AI and robots could have all the fun. So what should we do about AI? When I've been reading articles about what to do about AI, I tend to see three themes. One is around we should be gaining skills that AI can't replicate. We should pursue higher value activities. We should leverage AI to scale commodity work. And then the stop right there. The recommendations stop there, and you're kind of stuck saying, well, gosh, what do I do next? I don't know what those skills are. I'm not sure what the higher value activities are because that is such a vague term that I don't know where to go next, right? So it can be tough to figure out what to do about AI other than feel like they're after our hobbies so that we can work for them, right? That is not what we all signed up for. That is not what we signed up for in tech. I can guarantee you that much. So let's flip this narrative around a little bit. What can AI actually do to help us in this data analyst world and thinking about the future of the data analyst, our role or the role that we want to hand off to other people getting into the data analytics and IT game? So I would think about the data analyst role in terms of looking for the work that you and your team hate to do. That's where AI makes the biggest difference. So think about a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is prepping data and correcting pie charts that add up to 300%, because that sucks. Nobody should ever do that, and we should not have to fix that. But here we are, 2025, people still making pie charts, right? So I would say there are also issues around answering standard low-level tickets, cleaning up analytic debt. A lot of things that we really don't want to be doing as data analysts because we want to be doing the cool stuff. That's at level 5, awesome visualizations, creative storytelling, creating apps that people really enjoy dealing with, working with agents and figuring out how AI can be smarter by getting into the guts of that data and logic layer and getting smarter on how to make AI work for us. That is the cool stuff that we want to be doing. So really, when you think about it, we're trying to get rid of all of that 1 through 3 work so we can do more of that 4 and 5 work that is more fulfilling and interesting and future facing. So here are 7 roles that I think of as possible futures for the data analyst, the data virtuoso, the data conductor. I've got a little bit of a music theme going here. Math and coding experts, model and agent managers, semantic aggregators, business problem solvers, and analytic optimizers. So what do these 7 terms mean? Well, I'm going to dig in a little bit right now. So data virtuosos, I think of these as the absolute best individual contributors, the designers, the storytellers, the people who create the standards. If we're grading our employees on a 1 through 5 in terms of their analytic talent, these are absolute 5s, maybe 6s, 7s, 10s, hundreds. These people are the ones who create pictures and increasingly animations worth more than 1,000 words. They're transforming data to meaningful narratives. They are figuring out the race animations and figuring out how to do multiple versions of animations in ways that really bring data to life. They do really cool stuff, and they set a standard that nobody else is going to be able to match on a manual basis. And frankly, that AI is going to struggle to match in the short or even midterm as well. There's definitely a role for the great individual contributor to go from data analyst to that virtuoso or soloist level. The second role that I think of is the data conductor, where you are creating templates, best practices, and expectations for data. When you type in, for instance, a prompt and ask ChatGPT to do something with your data, it will give you a standard graphic. The data conductor has the opportunity to up that level, at least within your organization, either through a combination of better prompting or better logic or better data access. There's a lot of stuff in the middle that honestly has to be done to make AI useful. And that's an opportunity for a conductor to weave the magic in figuring out what kinds of standards should exist for creating charts. For instance, no pie charts at 300%. Bad practice, right? You should make sure that never happens within a business managed data environment. You can also think about using agents to support data integration, cleansing, and quality at scale. So you set the standards for what should happen and then let AI take over that work, because deduping and null values is not the best use of your time when you're dealing with millions and billions of rows. And then you can also set these grounding prompts, right? We can figure out what to put in the background to make sure that when an executive asks for a question and is wondering, what do my sales numbers look like? Or what percentage of contribution does each of these products provide? They don't accidentally say something that leads to bad outputs, because there's data logic that you are putting in behind the scenes and continuing to update over time, because the data is updated. You're going to have to update your logic in response. That is an ongoing role that is going to have to exist, and it is probably going to exist somewhere in the data analyst line of work, I would guess. A third area is around math and coding. So linear algebra, statistics, and some conceptual idea of neural nets, I would say, are important moving forward, because you want to understand how these models are conceptually getting to the results that they are looking at, whether you are looking at machine learning or basic algorithms or feedback loops or more convolutional neural networks. You want to know what each of these things are doing. I would say, although you don't have to get a master's in mathematics, it is going to be useful for you to have a basic idea of how a matrix works, because of the matrix multiplication that currently drives a lot of the neural nets that are used, as well as having a statistical understanding of what is happening, to understand when something is random, when something is not random, what level of variance should be allowed in terms of a data output, or what kind of variance will happen and does it meet a business standard. All of that should be something that you understand as a data analyst in 2025, because that lets you dig deeper into the analytic value propositions that are hiding in the data. And these are mathematical capabilities that I would say are at a high school or low college level, but honestly, there are plenty of fantastic classes online to learn this stuff, things like Khan Academy. And I find that this math is easier to learn when there's an actual reason to learn it. And as data analysts, we definitely have reasons to learn this. Next up, thinking about agent model and agent managers. So right now, we are being told that AI is going to be able to do everything under the sun. And there are going to be these large foundation models that are definitely going to be handled by the likes of Meta and OpenAI and Grok and IBM and Google and DeepSeek and Tencent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all actually doing great jobs right now, quite frankly. From a generative AI perspective, I'm stunned by what we have available to us today compared to what we had just 2 years ago. In fact, these things are changing so fast. I recently saw an interview from the CEO of Perplexity, who says, I only plan a quarter in advance because I cannot plan my business 6 months in advance because I don't know what we're going to have. That's how quickly things are changing. But what we do know is that as these models evolve, there's going to have to be somebody who handles things like retrieval augmented generation, getting the data into the model to help contextualize the outputs, or looking at model context protocol, another way of bringing data into the model more quickly, a standard that Anthropic is putting into place, or looking at agent to agent, seeing how agents talk together from separate ecosystems. That is a protocol that Google has put into place, but has gotten quick partnerships from the likes of SAP, Salesforce, ServiceNow, all the S's, I guess. But in all seriousness, a lot of big enterprise IT companies and tech software vendors have signed up to agent, as well as a bunch of the large consultancies like Accenture and Deloitte. So there's a lot of muscle behind that protocol to have agents talk to each other. Somebody's going to have to figure out how those agents are going to be talking to each other. And then model testing and tuning, which is taking a step back and remembering that models have to be fine-tuned and tested to business environments. You can't simply take a model out of the box and assume that it's going to be fantastic for everything that you're trying to do in your business. Somebody is going to have to handle that testing process and tuning to the parameters that you care most about. And that is honestly kind of a repetitive job that is better suited to somebody who understands the data deeply. That should be a data analyst job, I think, or potentially one of the data analyst jobs. Next up, thinking about semantic aggregators. So we get to what I love most in the data and analytics world, metadata. My favorite quote about metadata comes from Jason Scott, who said, metadata is a love note to the future. What a romantic idea, right? And thinking about that, we have a lot of value that we can get from metadata, but somebody has to take care of this stuff. And frankly, not even a catalog is enough to fully take care of the metadata. We have to define semantic layers. We have to look at jargon that exists across all of the different places where people work. So it might be pharmaceutical jargon, medical jargon, legal jargon. All these people make up these words just to make themselves feel smarter. And we have to figure out how that is contextualized into the business at large, right? So we also have to look at glossaries, catalogs, object-specific metadata, which I think is going to become more of a thing as we start seeing the data mesh come to life. When you think about the data mesh, it has been kind of misconstrued as simply having a bunch of data out there that comes together. But the real idea of the data mesh is that you have this decentralized way of managing data where any data can be connected to any other data through a consistent medium that is object specific. And it's kind of a mind-blowing way to think about data if you're used to thinking about a single data store. There is no single data store anymore in the data mesh, simply an infinite number of ways to connect data together as needed for the task at hand. So we're going to see some interesting new ways of working with data, but they're really dependent on the metadata definitions that we're able to put in place. And then that's going to help us to work across roles, skills, geographies, and all sorts of other work categories. But that all comes down to getting the metadata right. And we're going to need these semantic aggregators, and the data analyst is going to play a role in doing this semantic work. Next up, thinking about from a business perspective, we're going to need business problem solvers. I would say business consultants, but business consultants have kind of a bad rep, right? Who wants consultants? But seriously, we're thinking about these problem solvers who are memorizing key business metrics, management by objectives, key performance indicators. The ability to follow the money is important no matter what you are tracking from a data perspective. So even if you're tracking paper clips, you want to have an idea, how much are those paper clips? Who's using those paper clips? What are those paper clips going to help manage? And it could be that they are completely commoditized. That's important to know too, but you should have an idea of what, not just what you're tracking, but how much the thing you're tracking is. And I found that's very helpful in my career. For instance, when I worked in telecom, I always cared, how much is that caller ID? How much is that cell phone? How much does it take to make that call? How much does it take to keep the service on a monthly basis? And being able to dig into that level of detail helped me to ask a whole lot of other business questions afterwards. And so no matter whether it's paper clips or telecom or cloud or software or chairs or real estate or what have you, there are opportunities to not just track things from a geographic perspective or from a quantity and inventories perspective, but to take that next step and figure out what are the costs, what are the revenue, what are the margins. And that gives you an opportunity to be more of a business partner across sales, marketing, logistics, supply chain, procurement, all these areas where people are desperately trying to figure out how to get better. And frankly, we are in a macroeconomic environment right now where things are going to continue to be messy over time, and people are going to need the numbers lickety split to figure out what to do next. And frankly, not everybody is data fluent enough to be able to do that on a real-time basis. So here's where the data analyst comes in. You're going to get to both solve some problems and perhaps provide some real-time data access over time, so you don't have to answer every single person's question every single time at the lowest level. And then the Analytic Optimizer. So what do I mean by this? You know, a rose is a rose is a rose, but a visualization is no longer just a visualization for a bunch of reasons. Visualizations are now dynamic. I just mentioned real-time data. We are now seeing visualizations that are not just static, but actually change over time as the data gets updated on a very regular basis. We also know that visualizations aren't simply queries that come from the outdated data. They can come from real-time queries, workflows, APIs, apps, AI prompts. All sorts of things can drive visualizations at any moment. And we, as the data analysts and data experts, are often going to be asked to explain why a visualization may not match the real-time environment that it is supposed to be, that the executive or manager thinks they are pulling from. In some cases, they may be asking for information from the wrong app, or they may be asking the question in the wrong way and getting outdated data that perhaps is coming from an ERP record rather than a sales record. Just it could be, there could be all sorts of reasons, right? There, or a payment record. You might want the up-to-date data on your cash flow or your bookings, and you might be looking at the wrong historical record. So, but here's the challenge, I think. We are definitely seeing this trend towards what is being called agentic analytics, where the average end user is going to be able to type up whatever they want to see and get a basic idea of what they're looking at. So for instance, if they type, give me the sales numbers from 2024 month by month in Germany, and you have that set up, they are going to be able to get a chart that pretty much shows them month by month what that is, and you're not going to have to do anything for them to do that. But as more and more employees are able to create charts and perhaps even dashboards that quickly, how do we make sure analytics don't become as overwhelming as email or social media and lead to abandonment? I think this is going to be an opportunity for the data analyst, again, to think about technical debt, analytic debt, and figure out what is the real lifespan of an analytic output and what should we do to improve the value of the analytics rather than simply maintain an infinite lifespan. We're going to have to be gardeners. We're going to have to be pruners. We are going to have to deal with this order of magnitude, or maybe multiple orders of magnitude, of analytic outputs, and have some sort of scalable way of being able to manage this. Again, I think this is a data analyst job at the end of the day. Perhaps we don't know how to do it now. I've got to admit, I don't have the answers on how to do it right now. I just know that the crappy work always comes down to the data analyst, because data analysts know the data and they know how to work with analytics better than anybody else, right? That is just the reality of the world we live in. So here's some recommendations and considerations I have for the era of AI for the data analyst, something a little more specific than do something that's value added. First of all, just a reminder, everyone in tech has signed up for change. We have to change every 5 to 10 years anyways. This is our 5 to 10 year moment where we have to transform yet again to show that we are evolving with the times and that we are the data experts. So for each key aspect of your job as a data analyst, I would recommend identifying the following 3 things. First, which executives and managers are using your products or your data outputs, however you choose to think about it, products, outputs, analytics, dashboards, who is actually using those products and building usage on your analytic platform. So by knowing that, you know who your real stakeholders are, instead of simply trying to build for everyone. Build to the people who use this stuff the most. Second, figure out why they use your data and analytics products. I would suggest an actual meeting at some point to discuss this with your executive stakeholders if you have not done so already. And you should be in the room, and you should, frankly, feel comfortable running at least a short meeting to ask these questions. Why are you using the data and analytics products? Which business tasks are most important that you need to keep in charge of? For instance, obviously a quarterly report or an annual report is something where you need to have the data in place quickly. But there may be other decisions that they are making on a regular basis based on the data and analytics, where you have the ability to provide more real-time data, better updated data, or a better view of the data than they are currently looking at. And they simply didn't know because they haven't had this conversation. So it's important to figure out why they use the data and analytic products. And then finally, how do you make it easier for them to get better answers and do better work? So when you think about these managers, these executives, as I said before, we're starting to look at agentic analytics, where maybe the right answer is to give half of the job back to them and let them look up whatever they want in an exploratory way. But once they start running into problems, or once they are wondering if there's a better way to show something, that's when you, the data expert, the data analyst, come into the picture. And that way you can spend more time doing smart things associated with data, or figuring out analytic challenges, interesting formulas, interesting calculations that are going to be beyond the scope of what your managers and executive stakeholders are going to be able to do on their own, simply because they start getting to the point where you can't simply write a prompt to do that level of complexity and analytic maturity. You actually have to understand the data and analytics at that point. And at that point, it becomes a data analyst job. Second, next, look at the 1, 2, and 3 jobs to offload. Think of that 1 to 5 scale. We're going to wipe out all the work that is not great for us. That is something that we are going to have to do. I think this is a time to be proactive. You should talk to your manager and have an idea of what you want to remove from the data analyst job over the next couple of years, because frankly, data platforms and analytic platforms are going to come up with increasingly nuanced and powerful ways to automate simple tasks in the data analyst world. And not expecting that to happen is kind of a fool's errand, honestly. It is going to happen. We're already seeing the first steps of agents that can actually do work on their own and query and ask the user whether they should go on to the next step, or whether, and ask if they can get more information if they're missing information. That agentic transformation is already happening to some extent. So we should actually figure out what aspects we want to remove from our job, and figure out on the flip side, how do we do more of that 4 and 5 work? So figure out on the flip side, what is a 4, what is a 5, what is the most valuable part of your job, and how do you do twice as much of that work? Because let's face it, you can't just give up all of your job and expect that things will go status quo forever. You have to show a little bit of initiative at this time. This is a pivotal time, honestly, because AI is providing such interesting expectations to the executive suite. And if you're proactive, you can redefine your job in a way that shows value and shows that you are ready for AI. I think this is an important conversation to have this year with your manager. Obviously, you should walk into it prepared to say what you are willing to give up and what you want to do more of as a smart data analyst. Again, as I said before, models and agents will continue to improve. We should expect the likes of Anthropic and Cohere and OpenAI and Google and everybody else to keep doing a great job of building models, at least over the next year or two. There are a bunch of very tactical opportunities to probably improve models by another order of magnitude from a performance perspective, meaning they might have the same level of accuracy as they do now, but become a tenth of the cost from an energy perspective. And we're seeing some opportunities with matrix multiplication and with categorizing queries and questions more specifically, being able to use a mixture of experts models, all these little tweaks that are happening in the model world right now that could lead to significant changes and improvements. But it means that as this improves from month to month, it is more important for you to understand conceptually how models and agents are working than to get wedded to one specific version or one specific technology, because this is going to change super fast. Anybody telling you that they know what this is going to look like a year from now, from a model and agent perspective, is lying to you. All you can do is know that these capabilities are getting better, but you're not going to know exactly how they're going to get better. All you know is that there's a chance that some things are going to get better, and you need to plan your work from business perspective accordingly. I would suggest picking 2 or 3 of these areas over the next 100 days, call it. It could be faster. If you really know what you're doing, it could be the next 10 days. You could choose, but choose 2 or 3 of these areas where you know you are going to hang your hat over the next 5 to 10 years, because simply staying still with it at the data analyst role is not going to be a guaranteed win for you. You should figure out whether you're more of a mathematical person or a programmer, whether you love the data more, whether you love the storytelling more, the business side more, and start working in a couple of these areas to improve your skills. And then gain these skills based on the AI tools at hand, your educational access, and the ability to teach yourself if you're autodidactic. Give yourself, what I have on the right-hand side here, it's kind of this idea of kind of a script that you could build for yourself, just a one-pager that gives you a high-level goal of what you are trying to accomplish over the next a couple of years. And this should be something that you can talk to your boss about, really assigning these skills and having an idea of whether you need to upgrade certain skills or simply outsource the work to somebody else or the AI, and really rebuild your job. This is the time for you to proactively design your job rather than have it designed for you by a platform. So I would definitely recommend doing something like this and creating a quick plan that you can provide to say, here is how I am planning to change my job. So the bad news is change is inevitable. Growth is optional, said by John Maxwell. I totally believe that. But the good news is we in tech have always had to change. We're having to change again. And the changes that we're looking at are achievable. We are not talking about changes that are impossible to imagine. We're not talking about not having the resources to understand this stuff. We, at the end of the day, have the resources to understand this and to learn it. And this isn't a time frame of having to learn it today or losing the job. We've got, frankly, a year or two as AI evolves. We also get to evolve. We also get to learn, but we have to have that continuous learning mindset and pick 1 or 2 areas. Do not try to do all 7 of these areas. That is not going to be possible unless you are a super genius. And if you are, more power to you. That's fantastic. Be a super genius by all means. But for the rest of us, I think choosing 1 or 2 areas where you really understand where you want to get better and really working on that, whether it's working on your speaking ability, taking Toastmasters and other speaking classes, learning how to present better, improving basic slides or PowerPoint skills, not necessarily because you want to get better at them, but because you want to understand how graphics work in context of a presentation. That can be an important skill to learn as well, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, learning R or Python, learning how neural networks, learning how to train and test models to a greater extent. There are opportunities across the entire spectrum for the data analyst, and this is the time to pick one of those out for yourselves. So thank you so much for taking a listen to this. This is a passion of mine, obviously, as I've been around the data analyst role for many years. And I'm thinking about this a little now as I'm about to leave the industry analyst world, that this may be one of the last times I get to talk to a data analyst audience in a video like this. So thank you so much for this. If you have any questions about this presentation, please reach out. My email is right here, research@amalgaminsights.com. My website is still here. I'm planning to keep that up even after I leave the analyst space. And my LinkedIn is here if you want to connect as well. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you really enjoy, take some guidance from this and that this is helpful for you. Take care.